Hey everybody, I'm Adam Frimmer from DIYphotography.net. Welcome to our set. Today we're going to be learning 10 things that you can do to improve your interview skills. Check them out. Running interviews is one of the most basic tools a filmmaker should have. And at some point in a filmmaker's career, you're probably going to end up running an interview. I know I find myself doing tons of these on almost a weekly basis. But today, we're going to shift over to the creative mode and learn how to add an extremely creative spin on those interviews. If you want to tell your story right, the frame can be a super powerful tool in your arsenal. Through an object. To kick things off, let's start off nice and easy. Sometimes a little goes a long way. In filmmaking, the foreground is an essential component when you're on the job. Adding foreground elements really brings you into the picture by creating that sense of space. So to start us off, we're going to have the camera being slightly obstructed and shoot with a long lens. This will help us separate between the subject and the foreground. It really brings a sense of intimacy with the viewer. It gives you almost the impression that you're sneaking in or listening to what the interview has to say from the side. This is one of my favorites for a B-cam because it's so easy to set up. Straight into the lens. I think a lot of people either overuse or underuse this next one. Looking straight into the lens, it sounds pretty rudimentary, but when used at the right moment, it can do a lot more than just look pretty. When you have your subject looking straight to the camera, you can really have the viewer on the edge of their seat. The key is picking the subject matter. If you have the source of drama or you want to convey something to the audience without saying anything, this is the shot. The long-sighted interview. For those who are just looking to improve their interviews, this is a must for your basic interview angle battle kit. Here, you split the frame into three. The side that has only 1/3 is called the short side, and the remaining 2/3 is called the long side. That's easy. The long-sighted shot is probably the most common angle that cinematographers go for. To start setting it up, all you have to do is decide where your talent is going to be, meaning which side is your short side and which side is your long side. The subject then turns their body out to the long side and face the interviewer who is sitting on the long side. The nice thing about this shot is that, for starters, it doesn't block the talent's view of the interviewer. This lets whoever's talking feel a lot more comfortable, since they're talking to an actual person. You'll usually find that people who aren't trained to be in front of a camera usually prefer this method. And let's face it, it's awkward to talk to a camera when there's a person behind it. An important thing to notice is that if you plan on adding a B-cam, make sure you add it to the short side. Things get funky when you switch between sides. And this is probably a good time to learn about the 180-degree rule. This rule is used so you can establish orientation and screen direction. The 180-degree rule is basically an imaginary line that you define. This imaginary line is what makes you understand who is looking where. So what exactly does that imaginary line look like? Basically, what I like to think about it is line of sight. So she's looking at the interviewer. We have here our imaginary line, and you can see that behind me, I've already chosen which side is going to be my 180 degrees that I'm working on. So all of this is green light for me. If I were to put a camera on the other side, we would lose orientation and it'll start to look weird. That's why we have the rule of 180. It's also there to maintain the same left and right relationship, so you can always know where the characters are in relation to each other. A neat way to envision this is kind of to think of it like an audience of a stage. The most important takeaway from this is really just to try to keep the scene on one side. There are always ways to cross the line, but that's for another video. Behind. So we just talked about the rule of 180 degrees. This next one really takes advantage of that rule by setting the camera almost entirely behind the person. It seems weird at first to think that during an interview you would want to see their backs. But when you're trying to convey seriousness, sometimes momentarily taking the viewer out of the situation is a great way to increase tension. You still need to consider the 180-degree rule though, so bear that in mind. We're looking for just enough expression on our talent's face to feel what they're feeling, but we're also setting the tone by giving them space to say it. Wide room. Alright, so we had a lot of gloomy and dark ones. Try this one on for size if you want something fun. A lot of us like to reach for that 70-200 or 85mm when we're doing our interviews, but here's a less popular option. Try shooting a wide room shot. The The wide room is great for a lot of things. I love to use it when my subject is either fun or funny. If I have a character in a place that has a lot of atmosphere, or if you're shooting a doctor or charismatic CEO, a wide-angle interview could be the perfect shot for you to help the viewer connect with them. But it doesn't always have to be a great background. Sometimes less is more, and shooting wide spaces that are empty can have its own unique touch. BTS. Next, we're going to be doing the BTS angle. There's really not much to explain here. It's a shot from behind the scenes. If you set up an interview, chances are there's either a team or a lot of equipment in the background. What I like to use this shot for is one of two things. Either I'm doing something artsy and I want my audience to know, and they'll appreciate it, or if the client wants to show the scale of production. Now when I say scale, I mean the show. Showing that this isn't just a camera and an operator. No. This is a big set, and everyone and everything that's here is because the person we're talking to is very important. This is the time to pull out those book lights and heavy grip to make the set look super fancy. There's a few ways to do this. My favorite is when we see our subject through all of the equipment, but you can also place your camera facing the director's monitor, where you'll still see the talent. One more option is having the camera off to the side, but wide enough to see the level of production. You know how sometimes when you see a film crew out of the blue and you start trying to figure out what they're shooting and what they're shooting on? I feel like this shot is kind of the embodiment of that. Those who recognize things from the industry will appreciate it, and those who don't will just be intrigued by how serious the production looks. Underside. Okay, so this one is probably one of my favorites, and it's so underused if you ask me. I guess the basic instinct is to set the camera at eye level when you're doing an interview. It probably has something to do with when we talk to people, we tend to try and be on the same eye level as them. What's probably less obvious is that I recommend that you take your B cam and shoot slightly lower than eye level. The reason I personally love this is because angles are everything when we shoot. And for some reason, when it comes to interviews, it doesn't come as intuitively. When you go slightly under eye level, you make your subject bigger. It gives them more authority, and it makes them more trustworthy. You'll notice this is just a slight dip in the height. We're not looking to rent a hi-hat here, it's just slightly lower. Overside. For those of you wondering, yes, you can totally go above eye level as well. It just has a different effect. One thing to consider here is that it's a slightly harder shot to nail, and the subject matter really has to be there. I would probably categorize this as the most depressing shot. When the camera looks down on someone, they have to be in a weak place. It's sentimental stuff that really pops at this angle. The trick is when you're framing your shot to be able to see your subject's mouth as well as possible. I also recommend shooting at an extreme depth of field. The whole point of this style is to isolate the subject's emotions. Make sure your angle is capturing exactly that. Fluid flowing close-ups. Sometimes the angle of your camera is important, but if you really want to take the viewer away for a second to breathe, try taking advantage of the fluid drag. This style of shot requires a little bit of practice. You really need to work on anticipation in order to follow hand movements in a seemingly natural way. It really helps to have a high-quality tripod with you. Today we're using the 504X by Manfrotto, so we actually have a lot of control over our fluid dragness. If you have someone who speaks with a lot of body language, you can track their hands and face in extreme close-ups to really focus on whatever it is that they're saying. Someone who's angry is going to talk with their hands. Someone who's crying is going to be moving their head a lot. You have to look out for those small subtleties, and when nothing is happening, try panning or tilting the camera to get that extra movement from these shots. If you're mixing B-roll, this could be a nice way to have transition between them. Profile. Alright, for the last one, we have the profile view. All this really is moving the camera to be on one complete side of the subject. There's really two great ways to use this type of shot. First is if you want to show something on screen, you have a lot of real estate to do so. So anything like motion graphics or graphs, this is an awesome shot for that. The second shot, and I know it's not for everyone, I personally have never done it, but you can also do that cool kind of secret anonymous style interview for something that's really personal. The trick is really to highlight the outline of the subject. You really want to expose for something bright on the other side so you can focus on hiding their identity. So that's it guys, 10 exciting options for you guys to try out on your next interview. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like this video, make sure you mash that like button and consider subscribing to our channel for some more awesome updates, news, and reviews. For now, I'm Adam Frimmer from DIYphotography.net, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.